right, let me first of all say shalom. It is good to be here, and we're going to continue our study on in the book of Genesis. We're going to be studying chapter 3. We're going to begin today with verse 16, and we are making our way through the Torah. By the way, before we get started, I want to make sure I mention that if you go to Her Royal Roots, that's a place where you can register for our upcoming event, which is the following, I think it's the 11th, will be in Atlanta. So make sure you go there and register. We want to see everybody that's been watching and supporting and learning from the Ark. We look forward to that opportunity. Also, we've got the whole Shema Israel uploaded, and it's on
my channel.
Yeah, it's also on Her Royal Roots, so you might want to check that out. Okay, tonight we are going to look at something that it may be, well, I shouldn't say it's uncomfortable, but it's true. I want to deal with a subject that we may not like much. And I want to talk about consequences. Can you guys say consequences?
Consequences.
How about we say it one more time? Consequences. That's what we want to talk about. So get your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 3, and we'll begin from there.
I'm sorry.
Okay, incredible passage. Chapter 3 of Genesis. And we're going to start at verse 16. We've already worked through a lot of these verses up to this point, so we're not going to spend a lot of time tonight in review, but I want to start by just saying that Adam and Chua have disobeyed the voice of the Most High Yah and have eaten of the tree that they were told not to eat of. They have been brought into his presence, into the presence of Yah, and they are now, they have been questioned, and they have given their confession. And after the confession has been heard, we're going to see the consequences of their action. Now, if you turned off the the video right now, you turned it off too late, because you already heard me say consequences to their action. Consequences. The one thing that people, especially religionists, feel that they can avoid if they just get saved is consequences. The one thing people feel like they can avoid if they just ask for forgiveness is consequences. Do me a favor and keep your screen on for me to turn off. It's the one thing that people think that if they pray about it, somehow Yah will remove the consequences. I need you all to do me a favor before we even get any further. We'll do some studying together tonight. I need somebody to get me a dictionary definition, a regular dictionary. Go online, get it, or find it. I need a definition for this word consequence. Go on, look it up. I'm gonna give you time. What is a dictionary definition of consequences?
A result or
Wait, loud, because we got to hear this worldwide.
a result or effect of an action or condition.
A result or an effect of an action or a condition is a consequence. All right, what's the second definition?
The second
It
is
goes with it. Come on.
it just has a synonym. It says synonyms are result, upshot, outcome, effect, repercussions.
Wait. You reading that so fast?
Oh, I'm
You act
sorry.
like you trying to avoid some consequences.
I always get them.
Let's listen to them. Come on, ready? Listen.
Synonyms for consequences are result,
Results,
upshot,
upshot,
outcome,
outcome,
effect,
effects,
repercussion,
repercussion,
ramifications,
ramification,
concomitant. What does that say? Concomitant. Okay, aftermath or after
oh, there you
effect.
go, that's fine. Okay, the aftermath or after effects. So those words we all know, or we at least have an idea. It means that the definition is clear, that there is an action and then there is a reaction to the action. There's a consequence. And what is taught normally in religious circles, especially church, and it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the Catholic Church as the mother of all Christianity, or Protestant churches as the daughters of Christianity, which both of them, according to the scriptures, are whoring, or are whores and daughters of whores. One of the attractions to these particular religions is the idea that you can escape the consequences of your action. I remember people would say things like, you know, I did some bad, but I'm going to pray, and I'm going to pray for crop failure.
Okay.
I used to hear that all the time as a word in the Christian church. In other words, I done planted a lot of bad seeds, and now I'm hoping that they won't come forth.
Hoping some bad soil.
So a lot of people believe that if they just have, now I'm going to use a country word, if they just have a little smidget of faith, that it will remove from them all of the consequences for the decisions that they make in life. Especially if a person believes they are religious and they think that it is humble or humility to confess. So a person will have done something, let's just use the churchy stuff. In church, it's always sexual related. So a person can be committing fornication and they'll never stand before church. But as soon as they get busted for it, whether it's the pastor, members, whoever, when they get busted, then they feel like, I need to get up and make a confession. And I guess the idea of the confession is so that the consequences to their actions will somehow be removed. So people use confession as a way of saying, you know what, I'm going to confess it so I don't have to deal with the consequences. A lot of times parents, unfortunately, we do that to our children because we think we're being biblical. When we say, if you confess what you did, then you're not going to get in trouble. And so therefore the child is like, oh, so confession means I avoid the consequences to my behavior. So we should never do that, by the way. The decision on what the consequences should be based on your confession is reserved for that parent, not you. I'm just going to tell it so I won't get in trouble. That's not biblical. We're going to see here where our grandfather, when he was young, him and grandmama, when she was young too, disobeyed Yah. They ate of the fruit that he told them not to eat. They made fig leaves, sewed them together, and they hid. Then when Yah came to call them, they heard his voice, finally came forward, and then confessed their sins. So you would think, based on the idea of religion, that Abba Yah would say, well, since you confessed your sins, then I'm faithful and I'm just to forgive you your sin, cleanse you from all unrighteousness, so therefore there'll be no consequences. But the reality is, when you read the text, you're gonna see a form of forgiveness here. That's not the point I'm making. But what I want you to see is forgiveness does not equal removal of consequences. As a matter of fact, earlier while Hula was live streaming, she mentioned the root word for shalom. It's a three-letter root. It's hard to pronounce three-letter roots, obviously. But it's shalem. And when you have shalem, it has to do with restoring balance. So therefore, in Hebrew, there was never the mindset among the people who wrote the Bible. There was never, ever a mindset among them. Now, I don't know what's going on today in the religious crowds and the religious circles. I'm talking about the people who Yah used to write the Bible. They never, ever had the idea that shalom was a matter of just something vocal. Shalom couldn't just be like, I'm sorry. Shalom always represented restoration or the restoring of the balance. One of the reasons in the United States of America that we have so many problems with our youth is because the best this country came up with when it came to discipline our youth was a thing called juvenile hall. It's where they would take your child away from the home, put them as a juvenile in sort of like a juvenile's jail. And there, these children would go and they would serve so much time for their crime, and then they'd be let out. Right? While they were in juvenile hall, they're not required to do anything but be there. So when they come out, they're like, I stole that car and did 3 months, and now I'm free, and them 3 months really wasn't that bad. I ate every day, all day, had a bed to sleep in. I had, I found some friends while I was in there. I mean, yeah, I missed my mom and them, but they called me all the time, and I talked to them whenever. You get the point? Now watch this. If that child, same child, stole the car, and the owners of the car could take a rod and beat the skin off of them. I'm talking about like with canes, like they do over in China and Japan. In public, in front of everybody. Bend them over a barrel. And the person who car they stole takes an actual cane. Sugar cane. No, what's that thing called? Bamboo.
Bamboo. Don't break.
Okay, so if the car was a $20,000 car, a lick per dollar. I'm gonna whoop you till my arm fall off. The only thing is, you can't kill him because it ain't worth killing. But $20,000 car, you stole the car, man, you get 20,000 licks.
Now they do
Now he can do
10
10 today, he can do 20 tomorrow, he can get, watch this. And you're gonna go to work for him, the person you stole from, until you pay off the $20,000, because the car was $20,000. So you're going to work for him, minimum wage, which is, I'm just going to say now in this country, what, $10 an hour? Y'all add it up. And when you finally finish working off your debt, then you will be sent home and be free. I wonder how often people, little kids, would steal cars. How many repeat offenders would we have? How many? That idea of going in and out of, well, you've been in and out of juvenile hall his whole life. Oh, of course, because you done made it like his second bedroom. That's his guest house. That's his home. But if there was put in the mind of a child that his action has consequences that actually cause him to have to do something or feel something, and I made all those examples on purpose. I want to show you how that's been put into the Hebrew mind. Then what it does, hopefully, it is a deterrent. In other words, a person's going to think twice about doing something that's going to cause them way more pain than the pleasure it was to steal that car. You get that? Is everybody in the room? That's my introduction. That's my introduction. I can do the same thing with adults. I just thought I could make it plain with the children. So let's look at Mama, Grandmama Chua and Grandpa Adam in chapter 3. Remember, they have already confessed. They've already owned up to the fact of what they've done. Adam said, the woman you gave me, she's the one who gave it to me and I ate. The woman said, the serpent beguiled me and that's why I ate. But in both confessions, they both confessed that they ate. When it came to the serpent, Hasatan dealt with that last week, so I won't get into that today. He speaks directly to him and then curses the snake. But today I want you to see the consequences, because if you follow the religious mind of today, especially church. Now in some religions, they believe in yin and yang, which means that if you do evil, then evil has to come upon you. Which that is almost a biblical concept. They just take it to another level, but I think they take it outside the realm of the Bible, of the scriptures. But regardless, there's some religions that don't believe in just doing something and getting away with it. But there's a lot of religions or denominations that believe that as soon as you confess something, then there is no consequence. I want you to see, based in scripture, this is wisdom, so you should write this down. The confession of the sin of Adam and Eve, or Adam and Chua, the confession preceded the punishment. Write it down. That's wisdom. Their confession preceded the punishment. You know what we do today, a lot of times, is we want to beat the confession out of somebody. And so we have a whole system set up where when they try to get a confession, they torture people. And I'm not saying that torture don't work. That's not funny. I'm not saying it don't work. Because you can talk about what you ain't gonna say. You be big as bad as you want to. Then they start that torture. You say, well, hold on. And start singing, boy, like the lead singer of the Temptations. And you start, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that doesn't work, but I'm saying in this story, we don't see a punishment that happens first and then the confession. We see a confession and then the consequences are revealed. The confession does not remove the consequences. And if you don't catch nothing else from this message tonight, understand that when you go before Yah and you confess the things that you've done wrong, please don't think that that is a free card to remove the consequences. And I'm going to show it to you first with Grandma and Grandpa when they was kids, or young. They weren't children, they were adults when they were young. And then I'll show you some more examples and then we'll be done. All right? All right, so first, let us look at verse 16 as our Yahuwah Elohim speaks unto the woman. All right, ready? Y'all gonna roll with me? Everybody should be here by now. All right, let's roll together. He says, unto the, come on.
Woman.
Wait a minute, there's only like 2 people. Come on, everybody. And unto the woman. Hold on, unto the woman. So he is now specifying a particular consequence for her. Yes, Zion. Worldwide, 12 tribes of Israel getting understanding tonight. No matter where you may be, in Alaska, Germany, France, Mexico, South Africa, understand something. He does not put the same consequences on both people. The consequences are going to be personalized. They're going to be set up to deal with each of them based on their level or on his wisdom, I'll use that term, concerning them individually. And I'm going to have you notice, Zion, that you don't hear Adam and Chawah fighting after Yah leaves about whose consequence was worse than the other.
It's all bad. All bad.
That, oh, that was mean that he said that to you and made me do this. You got off easy. No, you got off easy. No, you don't hear that. Because here we know that they understood that Yah is placing those consequences to their reaction, to their actions, through wisdom. All right, so we don't see it similar to both of them, but we see here together we get one at a time. So watch this. So he says unto the
woman.
Unto the woman, he said,
I will greatly multiply thy sorrow.
Okay, so the first thing he says is, I'm going to multiply.
Great.
I'm going to multiply. And that word obviously means to extend or to enlarge or to make greater. The idea has to do with the intensity. That if you thought it was going to be intense before, wait till I multiply the intensity. He didn't say I'm just going to add it. Multiply. Now watch what he says. Watch the word. Watch the word. He says, I will multiply your what? Sorrow. Pause. Sorrow. Write that down. This is not racist or sexist or anything. Most women live in a greater sense of sorrow than most men. Oh my goodness, I've been looking at it for a long time. Magazines just full on the shelves dealing with women's sorrow. They sorrow over this. You got all these doctors and writers dealing with the sorrow of a woman. You don't see a whole lot of books, magazines on the counters dealing with the sorrows and woes of men.
Because they don't talk about it.
A woman has her sorrows multiplied. It's just a matter of fact. The idea of sorrow has to do with pain. So therefore, you have a lot of, quote unquote, the women of our day. Most of them are dealing with a lot of pain. Just period. We'll get to the whole childbirth thing in a moment, but just the idea, especially since we've been walking in truth, I've come to find out that most women today are hurt. They're hurt or hurting. That's not to say men aren't. It's just to say that when it comes to overwhelming majority, most of the literature that's written for women, by women, today, most of the emphasis is dealing with their hurt. So you're going to see a whole books about hurt, brokenness, despair, sorrow, weeping, all this kind of thing. You know, dealing with all kinds of stuff. From abuse to neglect to broken hearts, you know, bad relationships, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So, so today, one of the results of the sin that happened way back with grandmama is that you see that there will be this hurt or this sorrow that will be multiplied. Now let's put it in context, because I just wanted to bring that out, but let's put it now in context. It says sorrow and. You see that? So you see why I broke them apart? Because you're not only going to be sorrowful, but you're also going to have sorrow and pain at childbirth. That's not a good word. Conception is not really giving you the idea of what that word haron in Hebrew really means. That word means childbirth. So that childbirth itself would also be painful. So your life will have attached to it sorrows as a result of this sin. And your childbirth will also be that of sorrow, or pain is another word. Let me give you another word. Toil. Like when you work. Therefore, when a woman is about to deliver a baby, we say she goes into what?
Labor.
Labor, which is work.
Yeah, work.
Did anybody worldwide get some insight just now? Did anybody in the 12 tribes of Israel and companions understand how Hebraically we see that part of the curse is the sorrow and the labor and the pain? Did you see it? It goes together. So she is also given labor. She's given, I shouldn't say also, because I kind of already, I'm giving you insight on the next thing I'm going to talk about. She has to work. And her work will be painful. What she's put on the planet to do, which should have been that should have been completely joyous, is now going to be painful. Watch this. As a consequence, after she made the confession. She's already confessed.
But yet Yah is saying, even though you confessed it, though, you still got to deal with the consequences of what you did. And therefore, I'm going to attach pain and sorrow to your life as a constant reminder of the pain and sorrow that you have caused to happen in this world. And I'm also going to attach labor to childbirth as a reminder of how your sin has caused all humanity to now have to labor and be painful. So, that which Yah designed to be pleasurable, which was to multiply, be fruitful and multiply, he then also attaches to it pain as a reminder. As a matter of fact, of course, I've had talked to women who've gone through that. They say it's like going down through the valley of the shadow of death. And like you have to, I did talk to Jazz, and she said there came a point, because she did natural, she said there came a point where literally, Dad, I was like, I had to completely let go. Because the pain, the anguish, all that was happening, I had to let go. And she said, and it was at that point, I was able to sense the fact that only Yah could make this happen from this point forward. And, may I say this, that follows, again, what our society calls the miracle of childbirth. See, even in a wicked society, they use biblical terms. Do you get that point? So that not only do they have to go through labor, pain, which is part of the curse, but then but everybody says, but you need to be here to do what? To see or to witness the miracle of it. The miracle. Yeah, because it's miraculous how through all the toil and through all the pain, a child is ultimately produced. And then, when the child is born, it says that the woman forgets the pain of the actual delivery. Now, she don't forget that she was in pain. The idea is the child is much more valuable and wonderful and loving than all the pain. Okay, I got one more thing I want to add to this. And that is, so not only is there sorrow in the life, not only is there labor in delivery, pain in childbirth, but there's also going to be, you can write this down, difficulty in child rearing. Somebody laughed at it because so that child rearing will not just be all pleasurable. Child rearing for the woman is going to be difficult. And may I say this, whether you have 1, 10, or 20, you can confess that raising children is not easy to do. Now, this is not my lesson tonight, but if you raise your child or children in Torah, it will be easier. I will say that. Because some women that are not outside of Torah, they're like, what in the world do I do with this thing I just made? Or it just came out of me. And they'll say stuff like, and they don't mean no harm, but they just say, I wish this baby would have came with an instruction manual. And so therefore, there are billions and billions of books out there in the world telling women how to raise babies, how to nurse properly, and how to look for this and look for that, and da 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 da. And there's $1 billion industry in that field. And then, of course, course, once the baby's out of baby stage, there's a $1 billion industry talking about how to deal with the terrible twos and the tricky threes, and then there's a $1 billion industry how to deal with adolescents. There's a $1 billion industry how to handle your rebellious teenager. It's a $1 billion industry how to get your children to do well in college, and blah, 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 blah. So we know by the fact that there's so many millions of books out concerning child rearing, not just childbearing, but child rearing, we know that it too is a labor. And once the woman decides that she's not going to labor in that field, she will have crop failure. You hear me? When she decides that she no longer wants to work as a mother, biblically, I'm not talking about just a baby maker. I'm saying when she says, I'm no longer going to do what Yah tells me to do because I want to just be me, then expect crop failure. Expect children in prison. Expect it. Expect gang violence. Expect violence from yourself. On you, by your own. Some mother listening to me right now worldwide is afraid of their own child. Because somewhere along the line, you decided that you wasn't going to labor in child rearing. You was going to just let your baby do whatever she wanted or he wanted to do. And for those of you who are listening to me right now who have taken on that mindset, oh, I'm not going to raise my child any certain way because I'm going to let them make their own decisions, then there's no use for you. They should take you out. If you're going to let your child be raised any way he wants to raise, what does he or she need you for? Right. So don't be complaining when they go upside your head with a bat. That's what they felt. That's what they wanted to do. You raised them to follow their feelings. It's a cop-out. Because you come to a conclusion that you don't want to labor. You don't want to work. And I'm going to get to the man, that's what I said, because we're going to see that Yah is putting the consequences on both of them. But you see here in particularly, she has this deal with child rearing. No, I'm sorry. Sorrow, life, pain and labor, pain in childbirth, and pain in child rearing. Be part of the consequences for what she did. Okay, I'm not done. It says, and your desire, teshukan, desire, that word longing, according to the Bible, shall be to your husband. The Hebrew word behind this, or the Hebrew idea behind this, is that there will be something in you that will be reaching out for your husband. And in Hebrew, it literally means to reach over him or to be over him. So that you have this idea of not only is your life have pain and labor attached to it, but then inside of you, you are going to want to, or have the desire to have the position of the husband. You're going to want to be the husband. And you can see when we look at society today, how that has been played out. To where we have these strong women who say, I don't need a man. And you say, why? And she says, because I can be both mama, and daddy. And I know a lot of women say, well, I don't want to be that, but deep down inside you do. You like having the control, the power. Some women consciously look for men who have flaws so that they can exploit those flaws and assume rulership in the house. We call that a strong woman. So her longing or her desire would be to, in a sense, consume the position of the husband, to take it upon herself, because it is a position that would make her wise, if you please, strong. Let's look at let's look at chapter 3, but let's go to verse 6. Back up to verse 6. Chapter 3, verse 6. Where's my interlinear? I just dropped it. Okay, here we go. Hold on for a second. So do you see here where that there's a word wanema, where it says, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, and she took it and ate it. Okay, that same idea, the same idea is found in Genesis chapter 3 when you get to Sukkot, the word. But this idea will carry with it a longing for. Both words were translated in English as desire. One, she personally saw something and desired it, the tree at this point. But now he's saying, I'm going to do something with your desire. You will have a longing, not for the tree, hopefully anymore. You're going to long for the position. He says, but your husband will rule over you. Now, I was talking to Hulda about this, and I saw something in each of these consequences. I saw that Yah has, I'll use the term, shalem and shalom in each consequence. He has balance, and then he has shalom, which is wholeness connected to each of the consequences. You introduce or allow the corrupt word of the adversary to come into your life because you were looking for a certain thing, and as a result, nope, this is what's going to happen. But I'm going to give you something to help you. What I'm going to give you is a husband that will have the final say. So that when you get tempted again in life, if you ever pause and listen to a forked-tongued consultant, you kick your feet up in his chair, up on his counseling couch, and then you come home with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure, or I'm going to provide for you a husband who will overrule that. Now, one of the things that I've noticed all over the nation, one of our problems in the Hebrew faith, the women run the men.
Come on now, really?
It's one of our problems among Hebrew Israelites. Well, it's all over the world, but I mean among Hebrews, one of our issues. So therefore, if a woman says, I'll use something as small as Christmas.
You said the Hebrew faith.
Hebrew, among the Hebrew people. Well, I said faith. Among Hebrew people.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Among
why I
our
got
people,
stuck.
among Hebrew Israelites, is that if the woman says we're going to do this, the man acquiesces and does it.
Wow.
So if she says, I know you walking as a Hebrew, but we got to do something for the babies. Most of the time, the average Hebrew is not strong enough to say to his woman, no. She may say, well, you know what? You might change your diet, but I'm not changing my diet. It's very, very few men will say, listen, if you want to eat a pig, you're not eating it in this house. Because no pig flesh can come in here. We can't touch a pig's carcass or flesh. I can't even put it away. Bring it in here. I can't touch it. You can't touch it. You can't touch it and me touch you. So no. So what happens is, what ends up happening is, a lot of times, a woman's voice will whittle away at Yah's voice to where a brother will be like, okay, I'm going to compromise with my wife, that's this, so I don't have to hear it. I'm going to go along with her because I don't feel like fussing. You know, I'm just going to do this because I'm trying to live at peace. And so they put it off on shalom. But in reality, there is no shalom without shalem. And shalem, we learned earlier, is based on truth or on equity. So if things are off balance, and you're claiming to just acquiesce for the sake of shalom, you're going to discover it's not going to be shalom. It's going to cause more trouble. If you don't deal with it and straighten it out biblically, the split is going to become so great that y'all might end up in separate rooms. End up going to separate services. Maybe she don't go to service at all. It's just the way it happens. So one of the gifts that Yah was giving her for shalom was a husband who would have rule, and that rule would be a righteous rule. Remember, he's not talking about ruling over you to beat you on the head with a baseball bat. None of that kind of foolishness. Because that same word rule, when we get later on in scripture, we're going to discover it means to be righteous, like authority, like a leader. So like a man will also be like a shepherd, a man will be like a priest, a man will be like, it has other connotations, but not one who is physically abusing somebody. As a matter of fact, scripture says that we are not to do that. No man even abuses himself. We are to love our wives as we love our own bodies. Right? And the scripture is, of course, the Messiah. Okay. Does everybody see that her longing would be to be the man? And I've noticed something. I've noticed that in every relationship, even when women pervert the natural use of a man and burn in their heart lust toward other women, most of the time that woman will find a woman who is manly. So you see, even when there's two women, one woman or both will then begin to portray a manly attitude. They'll start cutting their hair like a man, they'll wear men's clothes, they like wear men's shoes, and they start talking like a man, all of a sudden their voice gets deeper, and then blah, 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 and next thing you know, we have terms for women like that who become a man. So it's kind of weird that they don't want a man to rule over them, but they'll find a woman who's manly. So even change even that to something. Because somebody's still gonna be the upper hand.
Somebody got to be the man.
Somebody gonna be the pole.
Somebody got to be the man.
So my point is that is just that's part of the issues, that there will be a woman. Part of her grace from Yah is that she receives a righteous husband who will then discuss and make the rule for the home in order to protect her from her desires. Her desires that are not biblical, I should say. Okay? Now, I was reading this over and over again, and it looked like to me she got one verse. Did she?
It's a long one. Was it a long?
She says a long read. That's funny. But that's one verse, ain't it? And unto Adam, verse 17. And unto Adam, he said, come on.
Because thou hast hearkened to the voice of your wife.
Wait, because you did what?
Listen.
All right. The word hearken is our Hebrew word shema.
No.
Shema.
It's the word shema. It's where we get our shema from, Shema Israel. And the word means, shin mem ayin. The word means literally to hear or to obey. So the idea of let me get this verse in here, because I want to show you something. I wasn't going to do this at first, but I'm going to do it now. Let me pull this verse back up. Hold on. Verse 17. Because you have listened. That's the word. That's the phrase we're looking at, and it's the word Shema. Listen to the words that are translated in your English Bible from this one root word Shema. Announce, announces completely, comprehend, diligently, discern, disregard, give heed, give earnest heed, given heed, hear, heard of a certain, heed, indeed, obey. Keep on listening. Listen attentively, listen carefully, listen closely, listen obediently. Listen, loud sounding, made a proclamation, heard, make their heard, make them known. Watch this. Make themselves heard. You heard, obedient, obeying, overheard, proclaims, reported, sang, show, sound, summons, surely hear, surely heard, truly obey, understood, understanding, understood, and witness. All of those English words and some I skipped all come from one Hebrew word, Shema. Now, the reason I put that out there is because Adam was not tricked or beguiled or fooled or hypnotized into disobeying Yah. He waited. He listened to her. He hearkened to her and chose to obey her. Please hear me, Zion. This is going on worldwide, talking about consequences. Over Yah. Watch this, Zion. He heard Yah first.
And made a decision.
Yah spoke to him first. Yah had proven himself to him first Y'all had a relationship with him first. Y'all gave him the commandments first. Y'all provided the garden and brought him into it first. So when it came to Joah, which y'all know as Eve, let's keep it according to the text. When it came to the woman, she was second. It was Yah. I wish y'all would hear me. It was Yah what?
First.
It was her what?
Second.
Many Christian circles say your first priority is your wife. I completely disagree wholeheartedly. My first concern and priority is to Yah. Everybody know worldwide, I'm in love with my wife. Man, Hula has, her and I have been together be 10 years coming up. And matter of fact, yeah, hanging out longer than that. But if Hula stops tomorrow and be like, you know what, I'm done with this whole walking with y'all thing. She got to go. You ain't gonna hear me say, you know what, y'all? Me and Hula had a discussion, and she said that, you know, we shouldn't be teaching no more, and we just gonna do such and such. And I decided, you know what, because I love her, and she's my number one priority, I'm gonna stop teaching for a few years, and I'll be back. You know, maybe if she says okay. Why y'all laughing? Because you already know, like, ooh, Maury, come on, man. No. Because what has to happen is, for every man listening to me, if your husband listening to me, even if you're a man thinking about getting married, I need you to hear me really well. Your first responsibility is to Yah. You're supposed to know his commandments. So when something comes to you that's contrary, you've got to stop it. Watch this. Even if it means the loss of your relationship. You got to be able to say, as a man, this is what Yah, but you got to know what Yah says first. But when your woman brings to you something contrary to Yah, you have a responsibility of weighing it. I'm trying to help you, man. When you weigh it, and she is contrary, and you go with her and then say, Yah knows my heart, you lose. Can you hear Adam saying, you gave me this woman, she's so lovely and sweet, I was just willing to do anything for her because you gave her to me. He goes, that's not really what happened, man. Stop that. This wasn't no matter of love. Everybody keeps trying to push that into the text, like he wanted to die for her. That ain't what happened. Yeah, come on now. What, you trying to make Adam's sin honorable? She told him the same thing
The serpent told her.
that the devil told her. And he thought about it and waited, is my whole point. He shema her. He heard her clearly, understood it, then waited against what Yah said and was like, I'm going with her. And just in case you think I'm adding to the text, it says, unto Adam, because thou hast done what? Come on, to what?
To your wife.
To the voice of your wife.
Who listened to the voice
So the voice of the wife then carries with it even a different, another insight. The voice is not just the sound that her vocal cords are making in her throat. Does anybody know the Hebrew word behind this? Huh? Yes, yes. And the word has to do with an absolute, or may I say this? The idea is she's speaking a command. Think about that. She gave, in a sense, a commandment. And he was caught between two commandments. When she said, what he said. Now, I want, and we can do this, you can look this up online, but I'm just going to tell you something. That particular noun is given in the masculine. Why is that given in the masculine?
She said it like an authority.
But she said it with proclamation.
Ah, that's it. She said, this is what we finna do.
He did it.
Now, while that sounds acceptable today in many homes, it is unacceptable to Yah. So what we have going on is two commands, two voices, two instructions. Adam chose.
You got men waiting to be told what we finna do.
Huh?
So you got men just waiting to be told.
Oh yeah, for sure. Man, because another word for voice is kind of funny. One of the words is in scripture, the Bible talks about a woman's nagging or her being cantankerous about something. And it's funny because it talks about a man willing to live in the corner of a rooftop than to be in the house with a woman that's doing that. And the idea is not that men just like living in corners of rooftops. The idea is most men cannot handle that type of talking and that sound. It's irritating like a drop of water that won't stop dropping.
That what it sound like?
So it's better for him to just go somewhere where he can chill. Now, here's my whole point.
Tell her how to
My point is, most women already know that they can irritate men to that level. Most men don't know how to do that or can't do that long. And if they do it, they learned it. Most men are not nagging most of the time. They want shalom. They won't just be left alone. But part of your job as a man is that you're going to have to deal with that so that you can continue constantly teach and rule righteously your wife. Another thing I want to mention here, well, matter of fact, he's going to say it. Because thou hearken to thy wife and have eaten of the tree, it's right in the Bible, you ate of the tree which I
Commanded.
Did it say suggested? That'd be a good idea. No, he said, I what?
Commanded.
I commanded who?
You.
No, it didn't say I command her. I commanded you. Now, ain't that something? Of course we know it's in the plural, but here he's talking to Adam. He's saying, I commanded you. So therefore, a man has to understand that his relationship with Yah is a relationship that cannot be or should not ever be broken by the command of anyone else. Do you remember when the disciples, the Talmudim of Yahushua, after the resurrection, were proclaiming salvation in Yah's name, which is interesting because the name Yahushua is Yah's salvation. So they were proclaiming Yahushua, right? They were proclaiming Yah's salvation. And the people didn't like it because they had already rejected Yah's salvation and chose a murderer, Barabbas. Remember that? And that was done by the leadership. So when the Talmudim were heard teaching this and doing miracles, they were locked up. And they were strictly commanded to stop teaching, stop doing miracles in the name of Yeshua. That's why I tell people that word Jesus, I'm trying to tell y'all, being a Greek, whatever, you miss the point of Yah's salvation. Because that's what his name means. They said back to the leadership, we ought to obey Yah rather than men. And then they go so far as to say in Acts chapter 3, verse 4, chapter 4, they go so far as to say, we cannot help but to testify to that which we have seen, right? And we have heard. Some of y'all got blank looks on your face. Quickly, let's get to Acts chapter 3. Acts chapter 4. Okay, real quick. I'm going to get that exact phrase for you. So you're in the room, look it up. You might get there faster than me.
Like 3 or 4.
Where it said, and they straightway command them not to speak in his name. Let me see. Read that chapter 4. It's called. I'm reading through it right now. There it is. Verse 17. But that spread no further among the people, let us straightly threaten them that they speak henceforth no more to no man in this name. And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name, and that word should be Yahushua. But Peter and John answered and said, whether it be right in the sight of Yah to hearken unto you more than unto Yah, unto Elohim, you judge that. He said, for we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. So the idea of anybody coming to you and trying to get you to disobey Yah, the answer has to always be no. So part of the consequence, and I'm gonna hurry on. Ooh, time, my goodness. All right, let's keep going. Let me get back to Genesis, because I want to finish this, because I want to show you the reason, which is because he hearkened to the voice of his wife, and he ate the tree which he commanded him not to eat, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Here is the consequences. Now remember, I told you he already confessed his sins. So if I confess, why am I still getting consequences? If I confess, you should just say, all right, now y'all go on back and play. But in the text, we don't see that. In the text, it said, cursed is the ground. And because of time, I'm just going to hit this softly, and then we'll catch up later. So I'm not going to get deep on this, but watch this. Do you know before this time, Adam never had to work to eat? Part of the command of Yah to mankind was, of all the trees of the garden, you may what?
Freely.
Freely eat. That means no labor. Just like they were to be fruitful and multiply and have babies, no labor. But now we see introduced something. The ground is going to be cursed, And watch the word talk back, in verse 17, in sorrow. What do we have in verse 16? In verse 16 it says, unto the woman he said, we're in Genesis 3, I will greatly, come on. And then in 17, what does it say? At the end, after it says, the ground for thy sake, in
Sorrow
okay.
shall thou
So lest you think that sorrow was only attached to the woman, here in the text you see sorrow is attached also to the man. His sorrow, though, is just the source of it, just happens to be from another area, but nevertheless, one of man's problems today, one of his biggest concerns, the biggest hurts, one of his biggest struggles is how he survives, how he lives, how he makes it. He says, in sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. What do you mean? It'll be painful. Work will cause pain. Toil. As I said, I'm just going to touch it lightly. I wish I could go deeper. 18 and 9, verse 18, you got two words, thorns and thistles. Let me just touch it lightly. Thorns represent trees that will put on thorns. Thistles represent bushes that will have thorns. So this is what he's saying. You're going to have thorns above you and below you. There'll be trees that have fruit that you could just go to now. I mean, cool, but now you're gonna get pricked every single time you go try to get this particular, because these trees will be putting on thorns. Where you had pure access before. And now all the bushes that have all the berries and things that you need to eat, you're gonna have to get through the thorns to get to it. And thorns and thistles, based on the Bible, is going to bring forth because of you. So that every time you get a sticker in your foot, every time you reach to get a berry and it gets you, or a blackberry gets you. I like blackberries. I'm in the mountains a lot. And a lot of times, man, I think twice, because I look at all the little stickers on the leaves and on the little branches, and I'm like, is it really worth it to get that berry? Then sometimes I just go and get it anyway. But my point is, I know that is a reminder that I should have never reached my hand and grabbed the fruit and eat it in disobedience. The thorns and thistles have to do with pain, and I have way more to get into that, because thorns and thistles are going to be used throughout Scripture. You all know this, as a motif. To eventually, you're going to see our King with a crown of thorns. And the thorns will be on his head as a result of what? Man's disobedience and sin. And notice that the thorns will be on the tree. Now, that's why I said I'm not going to get deep, but we can go real deep with that thorn thing. All right. Now, let's what else he says, verse 19. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread. That word has to do with substance. So, man now will toil for food. Whereas before, it would just be naturally given to him. Just here. Everywhere he goes, food just falling from trees and falling from bushes and coming up out of the ground. But now it's going to take work to get it done. It's a consequence. Is he forgiven? Yeah, we'll see that in a minute. But is there still consequences? Yeah, because you did that, man, woman, your life is going to be more difficult. And put this out there, Zion. Anytime we decide to disobey Yah, know that what you're saying is you are inviting pain, sorrow, and toil into a life where you it don't really have to be there. You're adding, what my mama used to say, you adding insult to injury. We already have to work out this as humans. Why add to it now? Man, I didn't know that this was going to cause that. Okay, but y'all said don't do that. Right now, everybody listening to me, if you thought about, matter of fact, let's just do that for just a few seconds. Think about a couple of decisions you made in your life that you're still paying for right now. Trips you out, don't it? And you look back on that, you say, dang it, all I had to do was be like, no. All I had to do was be like, no, I'm going this way. I'm not going that way. And you would have avoided all these consequences. Now, unfortunately, many of us were not walking in Torah. But even since we've been walking, we can look at our lives and say, man, I shouldn't have did this, I should have that. That doesn't mean that Yah don't love you. That don't mean that he don't care for you. It just means that there's consequences to disobeying Yah. All right. In the sweat of thy face. Here it goes. Here we go. Till thou return where? Oh. Oh boy. I think we just heard the consequence. You're gonna die. Yeah, but the servant said we're not gonna surely die. My wife told me we ain't gonna really die. I said, That's not what I told you.
They tricked you.
So for some reason you thought that the serpent talking to your wife was gonna overrule me and your good intentions, whatever, No, man, come on, dude, stop that. I don't want to have to talk to you like this, but the consequence of your reaction, of your action is you're going to the ground that will be resisting you and making you sorrowful, make you sweat, make you toil, thorns and thistles. One day you will join it because from it is where you came from. The earth is going to produce, if you please, work, pain, labor, sorrow, because it will be a mirror of you. You will have a life of pain, sorrow, and work, and eventually you will be reunited with the earth that you came out of. So because you did this to the ground, you're going back to the ground. Do you know what we say when we commit bodies today? We say earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Why? Because what he told Adam was going to happen, it's still happening today. It's a consequence. So, you know, who's not writing the book? She's doing most of the heavy labor. I'm on her sounding board. And one of the things we talked about was this idea of, but he didn't die. Right? He ate the fruit, she ate the fruit, didn't die. But did they die? So the truth of the matter is they didn't die the 24-hour day. But how about the 1,000-year day? Remember we studied the Bible where it says that 1,000 years is as one day. Is that in Peter? Somebody look that up because this goes out worldwide. I want to make sure you know I'm dealing with script. And 1 year as 1,000, I mean one day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is 1 day. Does anybody see that?
2 Peter 3:8 and Psalm 90:4.
Oh, okay. Can you read it?
Okay.
Y'all listen. Read it loud. What's the Psalm one?
90 and 4.
Yeah, Peter.
Second
3:8.
Peter, 3 and 8.
Psalm 90.
2 Peter 3:8. We get this out worldwide. I should put
It
it there.
says, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing
Be
that,
not ignorant of this one thing. Listen.
that one day is with Yahuwah as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day.
So, how old did Adam, how many years did Adam live before he died?
970.
72, 970,
No.
930.
Oh my goodness.
Here we
He
go.
was 900
Adam,
or
after
something.
he begot Adam, and all the days of Adam were 930 years, and he died.
Okay.
Genesis
So-
5:5.
Adam made 900, but he did not
970.
make 1,000,
So he didn't live one day.
which is, according to the text, he didn't make a day. Methuselah, who lived longer than anybody, lived 969,
Oh, 960.
but he didn't make 1,000. So the psalmist, as well as Peter, who quotes the psalm,
Let me read that one.
yeah, read the psalm. The psalm is what number?
90 and 4.
Psalm 90 and 4. And it's funny because we read this sometimes at funerals all the time. Go ahead.
For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night.
So it says, for 1,000 years in thy sight are as but yesterday when it is past. So the idea is 1,000 years to Yah is like one day. So Adam pays the consequence. The question is, that's why I mentioned earlier, how is it that they're still paying consequences after their confession? Because confession, Zion, does not remove consequences. How Yah judges is up to him on everything he does. The best you can do is bring your confession to him. And at that point, his justice speaks to your situation. Now, let me give you 2 examples and I'll cut it off with this. Moses. I picked a pretty good fellow, didn't I? Didn't Moses, wasn't he called by Yah? I mean, wasn't he called to deliver the children of Israel? And didn't he do it? You know, led them through the wilderness. Committed a sin. When they got ready to go into the land the second time, Moses was so fed up with the people because they had bugged him so much. They got on his nerves so bad that they had become so rebellious to him as a leader and Yah, that when they cried for water again, Yah said, go ahead, speak to the rock. But he was so upset that he struck the rock or smote the rock in English, in King James English. And water came out, but Yah said to him, because he said, must we give you water from a rock? Yah was like, ooh, okay, I'm going to have to deal with this. Because I can't let this set a pattern for my leaders to start taking credit for what I do for my people, even if they get upset. Now, we don't like the consequence. It seems cold-blooded. But do you hear Moses saying, you know what, that's cold-blooded? No, he said, you know what, okay, I accept it. What he said, I'm going to let you look over, but I'm going to have Joshua take the people in. It's a consequence. Let me get another big one. I can give a bunch of small ones. Let's get a big name, King David. Did he pray? Did he ask for forgiveness?
With blood on your hands.
Wait, watch this. Did he confess? Did Yah say, I will forgive you? So why was there consequence? Because shalem is a prerequisite of shalom. Another big name, John the Baptist.
Oh, John the Baptist.
John the Baptist was out there teaching, but then he got weak. And he sent a question out to the disciples to tell the Messiah, are you the one? Or should we look for another? Now, Yeshua pleaded his case in front of everybody, but nevertheless, John the Baptist lost his head in Herod's prison, in a dungeon. How about Paul the Apostle, who wreaked havoc among Yah's people, got called to preach and was one of the greatest preacher teachers that we've had since the resurrection, but the consequences of the sins he committed caught up to him. As he drug people in prison, guess what happened after he started the missionary journey? Y'all know the story. He got drugged. Matter of fact, some of the letters we have in our Bible was written while he was in prison. Forgiveness doesn't mean lack of consequences. Now, I'm going to close with this, and I'm not going to teach it. I'm just going to close with the lesson because I don't want to leave you guys hanging. I don't want you to think Yah's mad. Just because there's consequences doesn't mean Yah's upset. So let's look at Genesis chapter 3, and let's go verse 20. And Adam called his wife's name, and don't you believe it was Eve, because it's not. It's Joah. It's Hawa. How do you say it? Hawa. It's come from the word life.
3:20.
The Europeans changed that to Eve. It's Hawa. Because she was the mother of all living, or mother of that which is living. And unto Adam and to his wife did Yahuwah Elohim make coats of skin and clothe them. So that's my last point. Matter of fact, I'll pick this up next week right here with these coats of skin. But I want to show you something. If consequences was the result of Yah's anger, then he could have just killed them. But look at this marvelous act of compassion that Yah does for them. He then clothes them, puts a tunic on them of skins. He gives them a gift. In other words, your actions cause these consequences, but these consequences doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that's what you're going to have to do. There's consequences. The lack of a consequence does not, the presence of a consequence does not mean the lack of love. Oftentimes, it's exactly the opposite. When there's not the consequence, that shows you don't love, because you're not then teaching or giving the right lessons for the person not to do it again. I dare Eve to come back to Adam a few years later and be like, hey babe, I got some more fruit that he said we shouldn't eat. You want a bite? It's like, girl, all this pain you having, these kids running wild, thorns and thistles I'm working with, the sweat on my brow, you get it? No, this stuff. No, how about that? You're gonna go out there and grab you one of them apples and be cool, right? Why? Because the consequences are set up as a deterrent to the crime. Children, obey your parents. It says honor your father and your mother. Why? Positive. so that your days will be long. But flip it. Disobey. Be rebellious. So man, your days will be short. Now, I'm talking about consequences. Not dealing with do I love you or do I hate you. No, it's not. That's not the issue. It's not a love-hate issue. It is, I'm trying to teach you something. We have two girls, two little baby girls. And it's funny because they always think that whoever tells first should be the one without the consequence. So you know, be doing trouble, like doing things they ain't got to doing right. And somebody says, well, most of the time it's her. She'll say, okay, I need to know who did whatever. And they kind of have a feeling like, well, if I just get it out first and confess it, then I won't have to deal with the consequence. So they race to be first. And then when Hoover says, okay, you in trouble, going over there, you should see the shock on their face, like, but I just told you everything. Yeah, but that don't mean that you're not in trouble. Why? Because it's not just the confession, it's the forsaking of the behavior that we're after. Going to confession with the Catholic, in the Catholic Church every week for the same thing. Father, forgive me. I've done such a, and then some man behind a cage tell you, say a few Hail Marys. Then you say a few Hail Marys, come back with the same problem next week, next week, and there's never any consequences? No, that's why it doesn't work. Like I said, I'm not going to dive deep. Just going to put it out there. The consequences are to help you not do it again. It does not mean that Heavenly Father, Abba Yah, does not love you. Hallelujah.
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 Amen. All right, any questions? There's a bunch of them.
I stuff about that.
Okay, in the back and then Hoover. Go ahead. Not you.
On 18, it says, thorns also and thistles shall bring forth to thee. And then seems like there's a second part to the consequence. And thou shalt eat the herbs of the field. Is that a second consequence?
Actually, to be honest with you, I skipped that, and that was an accident. That part of the herb being food for you is part of, remember I said every one of the consequences have shalom and shalom. Part of the result of the work is that it will produce food for you. So the thing is, you're gonna get a chance to enter into the labor process and then be able to enjoy the fruit of your labor, which is, instead of them is producing thorns, the fruit and the food will still be there. Hallelujah. And actually, to be honest, one of the things that helps us as men to stay healthy is when we engage in physical labor. So that's part of the shalom. And it gives you joy, believe it or not, because we live in a day now where everybody wants something given to them. But to be honest, if you work properly for your meat, for your meal, for your food, you will eat it with joy. And remember I mentioned, I'm sorry I missed that point, thank you for bringing it up. Remember I mentioned that the woman giving birth, once the child is here, then the pains are forgotten. That is supposed to be the same way it is with man when he receives the reward of his labor. It's supposed to be like when I sit down to the actual meal after harvest, it's supposed to be so good, like, man, it was a lot of work, but look, it was well worth it. And of course, the greatest example of that was your grandpa, believe it or not. Your grandpa's name was Jacob, and he fell in love with Rachel, love at first sight. And Laban said, if you want her, then how about you give me 7 years of work? And the Bible says that those 7 years of work was to him like one day. It was like, woo. In other words, labor, proper biblical labor, physical toil labor, is supposed to then yield a blessing or reward. Yeah.
My thing was actually a verse, but when he said that, what I thought about was the fact that herbs don't need to be toiled for. It's something that naturally just grows out. You don't have to toil for like rosemary. If the seed is already in the ground, it's not like when you're out in the garden, it is a weed. Herbs.
Yeah, but all gardens take work. Or they'll be overcome by this stuff. And you're gonna go out there, pull some weeds and stuff. They will all gardens take
What
work.
about Trinidad? They just got stuff falling off the trees.
Now, Trinidad, y'all different. Y'all special
No,
on
I'm just,
this.
I mean,
But I get
it's
your
in that
point.
same kind of area is what I'm saying. The place where the garden was the same kind of area, like an oasis where stuff would have just,
Yeah, but again, there would be labor attached to it.
I mean,
Now,
but for the
amount-
herb, that's what I was saying. I felt like you said a shalom and shalem. Like, you have to toil for this, but this is just gonna be.
Pop up, it's there for you.
Right, it's like the idea of like,
Yeah,
some
but
things will just be,
That word really, the word in Hebrew will reach into the idea of food and your bread. They use the word herb, but it also means plants.
but wasn't grain meat and then
Right,
herb?
but I'm saying, but in the Hebrew, the word, you're gonna get to the word plant, so it's not necessarily like a herb, just like we think of herb. But I'll deal with that next week, because one of the things I wanna talk about too is how we are given a diet from the Bible. And that's, it's very important to see that also. But laboring for your meat will make your meat sweet, if you please. When I say meat, I don't mean just like cow, flesh. Laboring for your food makes the food more appreciated. That's all I'm trying to say.
Like that burger.
Ooh, you're joking. Yes.
When you said, when you close up, you said you're gonna give it to, is that like the first sacrifice you said?
Okay, so that's why I didn't want to keep going to, because I want to make a distinction, and it's interesting, because Hulu and I talked about that on the way over here. There's an interesting distinction between what happens in the garden and Yah clothing them, and now while it is a picture, of course, of being clothed, there's a distinction between the clothes they received in the garden and the sacrificial system that was imputed because of man's sins. And I want to bring that out. Yes, it is a symbol of being clothed by Yah. But I want to talk about the sacrifice, though, that the system that's put into place later has in it something deeper than what happened in that garden. So I'll show you that. So but it does relate to it. It is part of the motif. But the words are different. The word for clothing and the word for atonement in Hebrew are two different words, and we'll show you those next time we come forward. But that's a very good question. Anybody else have a question? Oh, Hula brought this up and I forgot to mention it tonight. One of the words dealing with the child bearing, giving birth to the child, on a deeper Hebrew level, is the fact that you would have an enemy against your seed.
Habar.
You would have a enemy against your offspring. So we see that when we get to her offspring, you'll see that they come under attack, right? And one child ends up killing the other, which was prophesied really in the Hebrew word about her childbearing or her child rearing.
You see that a lot, that where people had to run to Egypt because an enemy kept over.
Right, so therefore you're gonna see that the seed, or if you want to use this, the offspring or the children of Adam and Eve, and then Yah's chosen will always seem to be under attack. So therefore, not only have you caused unrest and sorrow in your own personal life, but now your offspring will also have to experience a lot of sorrow and attack. So I wanted to bring that out because that goes with the lesson, but I don't have time to get into that tonight.
That's like now too, I hear a lot of parents say, well, when I did that, I wasn't saved when that happened, but they looking at the aftermath or what their children do now, but you forget that your children still watched you when you weren't walking in Torah, when you weren't saved. And
Correct.
so the seeds that you planted they still, those seeds still manifest
Correct.
thorns and thistles in their life too. And so just because you chose to walk in Torah, which you did before Torah, does not change the course of direction you sent your children in.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I want to remind everybody to support the ARC. You all know that we are getting ready to go to Atlanta. I want to thank, and of course I'm not going to put people's names out there. I want to thank the few people who have sent in support. Some of you all sent some very generous support to help Cool and I and others, because we're going to take more than just us, get to Atlanta and get to Florida, because our trip to Trinidad, we really were over budget a lot. So when we got back here and we put the appeal out, some of you were touched by it and you sent some support, and we want to say thank you. If you will continue that support, continue to help us out, even like tonight, support the work of the ARC. If it's helping you and you're learning from it and you're being fed by it, then it is not a big deal according to the text to then support it with your physical things if you are being blessed. Now, if you're not learning nothing, then of course, don't help. But if it's just blessing you, then be a blessing. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
At www.awakeningremnant.com, and we now have PayPal, and so it's the ARC. It's on the web. It's on the YouTube channel. So I think is it Fresno ARC CA?
What?
The ARC CA.
Oh,
For-
paypal.com/thearcca.
PayPal.com/thearcca, and you can support through PayPal. We really appreciate that. Some people have mentioned that they wanted to give through PayPal. We appreciate it. Don't forget, sign up for Sukkot. It's going to be the most fantastic Sukkot. It's just beautiful. Look forward to having you. All right. Once again, Shalom.